should be a pretty quick one. There's a new book, a new 5e book coming out at the end of this month. I think it's the end of this month, January 2022. That I think it's Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse or something like that. And it's a big super monster manual, but it also compiles, I think, most of the races of the player races that aren't in the player's handbook and DMG and monster manual, like in the main the normal 3 books. I think it compiles like all the other races that are found elsewhere, like lizard folk's in there, Genasi, and in particular, there's also some updates to several of these races, including 2 that are being played in the Erlenmeyer campaign. Genasis in general are getting updated, and so is Deep Gnome. And both of them are effectively buffed, I'm pretty sure. Or at least they're less situational in the case of the Deep Gnome. I don't remember exactly what the Deep Gnome does offhand, besides having superior dark vision and advantage on stealth checks in rocky terrain. I don't remember what else the Deep Gnome does, but this new version of the Deep Gnome, and I think I'll link to a Reddit thread in the description of this video, but the new Deep Gnome, they just have some form of innate spellcasting, which I don't remember what spells they have like once a day access to. I don't remember what that is, but whatever they have, now they can do it, the normal, or as they could once per day, but they can also cast it with their spell slots if they have spell slots from their class. And I think they can choose one of the 3 mental stats to cast it with. And then the, what do you call it? The advantage on stealth checks. Now that's just proficiency bonus times per day instead of only in rocky terrain, which is, it's much more applicable. You can use it, you can use it wherever. And if you're making at least, if you're level 9 and you're making, you can get advantage on 4 stealth checks a day. So, makes them even better rogues, sneaky characters, which the Deep Gnome in Erlenmeyer is a rogue, so they're just going to be even better at stealth now. If the player decides to use this new version of the race instead, and the DM also allows it, but that DM usually allows most things. Now the Air Genasi, they got they get a bunch of improvements. Genasi in general, now they get dark vision. Because it was weird that only the Fire Genasi has dark vision, but the other 3 didn't get it. So now they all get it, which means Zephyria will get dark vision now. They also have innate spell casting, and they can cast it with their spell slots, blah, blah, blah. And in addition, it's no longer, or spells cast in that way is no longer a Constitution cast, or their spellcasting modifier isn't Constitution anymore. Now they can choose when they create their character, so they can choose once. They can't choose whenever they want. So when making the character, they can choose one of the mental stats to be their spellcasting modifier for these spells. And for Zephyria, she'd probably choose Charisma because that's her highest mental stat. Then, Air Genasi in particular, like all the other Genasis, gets cool stuff, like Fire Genasi gets Flame Blade once per day, I think at a slightly higher level. The Earth Genasi get a weird one, where they get the Blade Ward cantrip, which is a cantrip that gives you resistance. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. It gives you resistance to the 3 physical damages for a turn, or for a round, I should say. But they get the ability to cast it as a bonus action, proficiency bonus times per day, which is really interesting. It's kind of a weird one. What is this guy doing? People are really bad at driving. So they can cast a proficiency bonus times per day as a bonus action, which is really cool. And that would have actually been really good for Turok, the Earth Genasi paladin that was in the Forsdale Vanishing and Terrapin Station one shots, played by Warren. But that would have been cool. That's a nice little feature. But I think Air Genasis actually make out the best here because they get an extra 5-foot movement speed. So now Zephyria's current movement speed would go up to 45. Oh, that's the other thing about deep gnomes. Real quick, as an aside, gnomes or like small races don't have a movement penalty anymore, according to this book, I think. So Zika also gets faster, and Henich is back to being the slowest in the group, tied with Ayla. Now, that said, there's no leaks about what if Lizard Folk have gotten any changes, so I don't suspect they would have gotten any changes, but anyway, back to Air Genasi. So they get increased movement speed, they get lightning resistance. I don't think they had a resistance before. I know Water Genasi had acid resistance, but which is kind of a weird one. But yeah, Air Genasi get lightning resistance, which is cool. And then, in addition to levitate, I think it's still an at-will levitate on themselves, or maybe it's once per day. Whatever it is, they can just cast it once per day. So it's innate spell casting again. They also get Featherfall and the Shocking Grasp cantrip, which that would be really cool for Zephyria, because outside of combat she can use that cantrip to just zap people, which would be really fun, like in interrogations or torture scenarios, which is saying it out loud. Actually, that's kind of nasty, but she could just shock people. That's really fun. Yeah, but so, and they just keep their unending breath, so Air Genasi just get flat out better. Yeah, like I just mentioned, I don't think Lizard Folk are listed in there, but I don't know if they get any changes. I don't think they need any. Maybe something with the Hungry Jaws. I could see Hungry Jaws moving to proficiency bonus times per day. Because that's that's how most things are going instead of just once per long rest. Because it's not that powerful of a feature. It'd be really weird if they gave it like a dexterity scaling instead. That would break a lot of molds, and it would also be perfect for Henich, but being a dex-based ranger. But that's the only real change I could see for Lizard Folk. Proficiency bonus times per day to use Hungry Jaws as a bonus action. If they could do something real fucked up and put in, like, make their AC scaling instead of 13 plus dex, make it 10 plus proficiency bonus plus dex, that would be fucked up. That suddenly Lizard Folk have the best AC ever for no reason, but they're not doing that. I'm just coming up with bullshit right now anyway. But in addition to going over those things, I wanted to talk about what happens when a new book comes out and, options change. Say, like, and, you, in your ongoing campaign, you want to use the new options. Well, how does that work exactly? Because there's always a little bit of a disconnect between the mechanics and the narrative. But they should tie as close you should get them to tie together as closely as you can. But if there's a little disconnect, it's not that bad because, the characters don't know what a hit die is, for example. The game mechanics are sometimes just game mechanics. But, so what do you do when, something like this updates in the middle of the campaign? How do you treat that? Well, if it's just some, like, numbers and mechanics that change around, but you're still mostly doing the same thing, but, like, some formulas change, you don't really have to do anything. Like, for Henich, we updated from when Tasha's came out, we started using instead of using like favored foe or favored enemy and natural explorer. We switched to deft explorer and favored foe. They didn't really change that much. It's just Hanich stopped casting Hunter's Mark and he started using favored foe instead. And then now he just had, instead of like having expertise or advantage on rolls in forests, now he just had expertise and perception. And we just, some numbers changed around, but nothing really changed as far as the actions that the character is taking. But if, like in the case of this Air Ganassi, one Zephyria suddenly gains dark vision out of nowhere. She gets a cantrip, and she now has increased movement speed, which that's just a numbers thing. She can just move a little farther. That's not that big a deal, but she gets dark vision, a free cantrip, and an additional spell she can cast at will. How do you explain that? For Zephyria in particular, I think that works relatively well in that she's already like a semi-magical character that's trying to figure out her magic. So her like changing over to this can actually, you can just explain it as she's getting a better handle on some of her magic. Something like that. And that, like, an explanation like that works pretty well. But if like let's say you were using an Unearthed Arcana subclass instead, and then the next book comes out and it gets confirmed that Unearthed Arcana is being abandoned. Do you keep using that one? Do you keep using the Unearthed Arcana as it is because you like it? There's no reason you can't. But let's say it's officially abandoned, and maybe you're a table that they try to use official sources for whatever reason. So instead, you go from, okay, this Unearthed Arcana is abandoned. It's now illegal in your table's in these weird rules that I personally wouldn't agree with. So now it's illegal, and you can't use that Unearthed Arcana anymore. Well, you have to fit into the narrative somewhere that you change subclasses. And there are some rules for changing subclasses now with Tasha's. But how do you deal with that in the game? If you're switching from a Seeker Warlock, which is a really old Unearthed Arcana revolving around, you get a Raven Familiar. Maybe you have to switch from a Raven Familiar to Hexblade to keep the Shadowfell Raven Queen type vibe going on. Your Raven turns into a sword or something, whatever it is. Or you have to figure out a new patron. And that's up to the DM and the character and the player. But I think that kind of stuff is an interesting question. When mechanics and rules update in the middle of an ongoing campaign, there's a lot of different ways to deal with it. You could just ignore it, especially if it's just numbers. But if it's big mechanical changes, and you suddenly have access to new things, or you lose access to things, how do you deal with that? And there isn't really a single, it's like a lot of things in D&D, there isn't a single catch-all answer that you can just use. So, just some thoughts I had as a result of reading these things. Good times. Zephyria and Zika will be getting better if they decide to use these options.